Donald Trump sat in his office at the White House, reviewing the documents on his desk. After a long and exhausting day, he was going through the stack of letters that had been delivered to him when his secretary stepped in. "Mr. President, I thought you should read this one personally," she said, placing a small, neatly sealed envelope in front of him. Trump was used to receiving countless letters, some about official matters, others from supporters, but something about this one felt different. He glanced at the envelope, noticing the sender's name scrawled in small, shaky handwriting: Ethan Carter. Trump furrowed his brow and carefully opened the envelope. As he pulled out the paper inside, a strange feeling settled in his chest. As he began reading, the room seemed to fall into complete silence. Ethan was a 10-year-old boy battling a terminal illness. Doctors had told him that he didn't have much time left, but he hadn't written this letter to talk about his pain or ask for help. Instead, he wanted to ask Trump a simple yet profound question. "Dear Mr. President, what does it mean to be strong? People say you never cry, but I think crying can also be a sign of strength. If you are truly strong, can you show me that strong people have feelings too? Would you write me a letter?" Trump read the letter over and over again. Strength. Throughout his life, he had been seen as a strong leader, a powerful businessman, a father, and a man who never wavered. But what did it truly mean to be strong? Ethan's seemingly simple question sent him into deep thought. His secretary walked back in and noticed the expression on his face. She hesitated. "Mr. President, is everything all right?" Trump paused for a moment, then nodded. "I'm going to write him back," he said. That night, the lights in the White House burned late into the evening. Trump sat at his desk, thinking about how to respond to Ethan's letter. He picked up a pen and began to write from the heart. "Dear Ethan," he began, "I read your letter, and you asked me a question no one has ever asked me before. What does it mean to be strong? People often think that being strong means never being afraid, but I want to share a secret with you. True strength is sometimes admitting that you are afraid." Trump wrote about his childhood, his fears, and his failures. He told Ethan that courage wasn't about looking tough, it was about being able to acknowledge your feelings. When he finished writing, he looked at the paper for a moment, then slowly signed his name: Donald J. Trump. The next day, the letter was sent via special courier to Ethan's hospital. When Ethan received the letter, his eyes widened with excitement. He tried to sit up in bed, but his body was weak. His mother, watching her son open the envelope with trembling hands, felt tears well up in her eyes. As Ethan read the letter, a smile spread across his face. A few tears slipped down his cheeks. "He wrote back," he whispered. "He really wrote back." That letter wasn't just a response, it was the most precious gift he could have received in his final days. The nurses and doctors at the hospital later said that Ethan held onto that letter every single day. Every morning when he woke up, he would read it again. To him, it was a light in the darkness, a reminder that his voice had been heard. But time moved quickly. Ethan's condition worsened, and one morning his mother found him in his room, clutching the letter to his chest. He looked peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep, but he would never wake up again. When the news reached the White House, Trump sat alone in his office, lost in thought. He had dealt with losses before: failed deals, tough elections, global crises. But this was different. A child had clung to his words in his final moments. A few days later, Trump requested a private meeting with Ethan's family. There were no cameras, no press. He didn't want publicity. He just wanted to sit with them, to honor their son's memory. When he arrived at the hospital, Ethan's parents stood waiting for him. His mother still held Trump's letter, now worn and slightly crumpled from being read so many times. Trump hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and took Ethan's mother's hand. "Your son was incredibly brave," he said. "He taught me something I will never forget." His mother smiled through her tears. "He really cared about you. He knew you were more than just a leader. He knew you were a person, too." Trump nodded, swallowing hard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, specially crafted medal. It was engraved with two words: true strength. He handed it to Ethan's mother. "This is for him," he said, "because he showed the world what real strength looks like." Ethan's father took the medal, holding it tightly. He lowered his head for a moment before looking up again, his eyes filled with emotion. "He believed in you," he said quietly. "Not as a politician, but as a man." Trump pressed his lips together. For the first time in a long while, he had no words. He could face world leaders, make million-dollar deals, and debate the toughest opponents. But in that small hospital room, standing before a grieving mother and father, all he could do was feel. Ethan's mother handed the letter back to Trump. "This is yours now," she said softly. "My son is gone, but his message will live on." Trump looked down at the letter in his hands. "If you are truly strong, can you show me that strong people have feelings too?" He read those words again and again. Then, for the first time in years, Donald Trump felt his eyes well up with tears. The room was silent. Ethan's mother smiled and nodded. That's all he wanted to see. Trump took a deep breath and looked up. "Ethan will never be forgotten," he said. "Not by me, not by anyone." As Trump left the hospital, he carried only one thing with him, Ethan's letter. And in that letter, he had found the most powerful message of all. True strength is not about never falling. It's about getting back up, even when your heart is breaking. The next day, a photo went viral across social media. Donald Trump, holding a child's letter in his hands, his expression unreadable, his grip firm. And beneath the photo, the words that had changed him forever. True strength is knowing that even the strongest hearts can break. Donald Trump received the news of Ethan's passing while sitting alone in his office at the White House. He gazed out of the window, lost in thought, trying to process the emotions stirring inside him. Throughout his life, he had met countless people, faced countless challenges, and made decisions that shaped the world. But nothing had ever felt quite like this. A 10-year-old boy's simple question had touched him in a way nothing else had. Trump had always portrayed himself as a strong leader, a businessman, a father, someone who never backed down. But now, because of a single letter from a child, he found himself questioning what true strength really meant. He couldn't stop thinking about how Ethan had held onto his letter until the very end, as if it were his last connection to the world. The idea that his words had brought comfort to a child in his final days weighed heavily on him. For the next few days, he avoided the press, declined meetings, and remained unusually quiet. His staff noticed the change but said nothing. They knew something about Ethan's letter had shaken him. Then, one morning, Trump made a decision. He requested a private meeting with Ethan's parents. No cameras, no media, no speeches. This wasn't about politics. It wasn't about public relations. It was about a grieving family. It was about honoring a little boy who had left the world too soon. When he arrived at the hospital, Ethan's parents stood waiting for him in a small, quiet room. The moment Trump stepped inside, he saw it. The letter he had written to Ethan, still clutched tightly in his mother's hands. The paper was slightly crumpled, its edges worn from being read over and over. Ethan's mother looked up at Trump with tear-filled eyes. "He never let go of it," she whispered. Trump swallowed hard and nodded. He wasn't sure what to say. For the first time in years, he wasn't standing in front of a crowd, wasn't giving a speech, wasn't debating an opponent. He was just a man, standing in front of two grieving parents. After a long moment of silence, he finally spoke. "Your son was one of the bravest kids I've ever known," he said. "He taught me something I'll never forget." Ethan's mother wiped her tears and smiled softly. "He truly believed in you," she said. Not as a president. As a person, Trump felt something tighten in his chest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, specially crafted medal. It was silver, polished, and engraved with two simple words: true strength. He handed it to Ethan's mother. "This is for him," he said, "because he showed the world what real strength looks like." Ethan's father took the medal in his hands, gripping it tightly as he lowered his head. The room was filled with silence, one of those rare moments where words weren't necessary. Then, slowly, Ethan's mother extended the letter toward Trump. "This belongs to you now," she said gently. "My son is gone, but his words will live on." Trump hesitated for a moment before taking the letter from her hands. He looked down at it, rereading the words Ethan had written. "If you are truly strong, can you show me that strong people have feelings too?" He read that line over and over, and then, for the first time in a very long time, Donald Trump felt his eyes well up with tears. He took a deep breath and looked up. Ethan's mother gave him a knowing smile. "That's all he wanted," she said. "To know that even the strongest hearts can feel." Trump nodded, gripping the letter tightly. "Ethan will never be forgotten," he said. "Not by me, not by anyone." As Trump left the hospital, he carried only one thing with him: Ethan's letter. That night, he sat alone in the Oval Office, staring at the words on the worn piece of paper. For the first time in years, he understood what true strength meant. It wasn't about never breaking. It was about having the courage to show that you could. And the next morning, a single photograph made its way across the internet. Donald Trump sitting at his desk, holding a child's letter in his hands. His expression unreadable, his grip firm. And beneath the photo, the words that had changed: "True strength is knowing that even the strongest hearts can break."